I haven't done one of these talking videos in so long. Wow, I don't even know where to start. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Josh Greenbaum. Welcome back to my channel, Creating Vision, also known as Josh Greenbaum. I haven't made like a full-on talking video like this in quite some time. And if you're looking at the title, you basically know what this is about. I'm just gonna rattle off a few reasons on why I switched from Canon to Sony. Now, before I go into anything and before I talk about why I switched from Canon to Sony and reasons and all this stuff, my dog is moving around on his bed, so if you hear that noise, that was him. You could obviously tell I'm a small creator, and in this video I'm basically just giving my opinion and, you know, my feelings towards each product and each brand. It doesn't mean that what I say is wrong or right or anything like that. It's just opinion, take it as is. Maybe you're in the market for a camera or you don't know which company to go with. Maybe this video could help you. So stick around to the end and let me know what you think. Let's just start off by saying I've been using Canon for the last few years now, but I started off on Sony and I brought it with me. This was my first Sony camera, the Sony Handycam. I got this when I was 16 years old at B&H Photo in New York City. It had a flip out screen and everything like that, and it was great. It was amazing. It took mini DVs. The battery doesn't work, so I can't open it up, but I ended up putting like a wide angle lens on it, and I just made a bunch of videos with my friends, and we just had the most fun. From this camera, I went to this camera. Remember this little guy? The Sony Cybershot. This was great. I did more of the vlogging type stuff back in the day with this guy. And this was an awesome camera, it still is. And then that was my last Sony camera, up until now. But from that Sony, I went to the Canon T5i, and then from the Canon R6. And right now, if you're wondering, I'm currently filming on the Sony FX3 with a 16-35 G Master lens. Now, to get into why I switched from Canon to Sony, I want to talk about a few reasons. I wrote them down. So I'm mainly an aspiring creator, aspiring YouTuber, aspiring content creator, all that greatness. But I have used and done other types of filmmaking, whether that be filming for bands, weddings, anything like that. Currently, when I say reliability, I mean, if you know about the Canon R6, you know that it does overheat. And unfortunately, with all the firmware updates and they say it works better, I've had that camera overheat multiple times on me. And I feel like reliability for a camera, whether you're doing something like this or you're out in the field and your camera says that it's overheating, I just feel that that's not professional. I just don't feel good knowing that I have a camera in my hand and that it can crap out on me at any point in time, and then I have to shut it off and wait for it to cool down in order for me to start shooting again. It just doesn't feel good. Next topic I want to talk about is image quality and color science between Canon and Sony. And this has always been a huge topic between color science and if Canon has better color science than Sony or whatever that may be. Now, I've always loved Canon colors. Canon colors are great. I've always loved Canon colors. But I really, after using this camera and seeing other footage from other videos I've watched, seeing the footage from my friends that have Sony cameras, I really do like the Sony colors. Now, I would basically say that Canon colors are more natural in a way. People may flip this around, but for me, I feel like when I use C-Log3 using Canon, and specifically the R6, it was more natural, which is fine, that's great. But then using S-Log3 for Sony, I feel like it's a little bit more cinematic. And I feel like the colors can be a little bit more cinematic, and I've always wanted that more cinematic feel, that more cinematic tone when I make videos, whether that's YouTube or any other type of film. And I just prefer Sony colors now. I'm not saying that Canons are bad, I'm just saying that, jumping to the other side, I actually do appreciate Sony colors now. Next, size, weight, ergonomics. So as you know, if you're a Canon user or a Sony user, Canon cameras are a little bit bigger and a little bit more bulky than Sony. And I've always appreciated the Canon cameras, you know, grip and the size and everything like that. I used to think that Sony cameras were a little bit small, but after you know, a little bit of testing them and, you know, holding them in my hand, I actually prefer now more than ever the Sony ergonomics and the Sony compact feel design and the weight of like a Sony camera. FX3, A7S III, you know, all these smaller cameras with the R6 and everything like that. It's a bigger body. I just like the more compact feel. I like knowing that like I have a really nice professional camera, but it's small and it's lightweight and it's compact, and I can put it in my bag, and it takes up way less space, and I appreciate that. I just love smaller items. I just love having smaller iPhone. I'd rather have the Pro over the Pro Max. I'd rather have the smaller phone over the bigger phone. I'd rather have the smaller camera over the bigger camera. So that's just me. Some people are different. Some people like a bigger camera. Maybe their hands are bigger. My hands aren't that big, so I feel like my hands are, you know, medium sized, and being able to hold on to the grip on these Sonys is really nice, and it fits my hand well, and I like the feeling, I like the grip, and I appreciate the ergonomics of Sony versus Canon. So we're gonna talk about photo first versus video first. I always consider myself more of a video first guy. I make videos. I do love taking photos, but I am way more video first than photo first. And that's why I feel like I gravitated towards that R6 when I had it, because it was a hybrid camera and I was able to do a little bit of video plus photo, but I always migrated a little bit more towards video because that's just what I do. That's just what I love. I've been into video forever, and I've just always dabbled in photography just because they kind of go hand in hand, and I like taking pictures. Canon, I feel like, is more photo first and video second. That's why they have the hybrid cameras, the R6, R7, R8, or any of those. Most of them are photo first cameras, video second. So they don't really have a lot of the video capabilities that you see in a lot of these Sony cameras. When you look at Sony, they put more video features into their cameras. It's a lot more video first, depending on the camera that you get. Some of their cameras are photo first, some of them are hybrid photo video, but then some of them are strictly video. And that's what I like. When it comes to Canon, it's a little bit, you're in that hybrid state a lot, but then if you kind of just want to go full-on video, you have to kind of just jump into their cinema line, and that obviously is way more expensive. The R5C, even the R5, and higher than the R5C, you know, into those bigger cinema line cameras. You don't really have like more of a compact camera that has those video-centric features. There's no like real split that Canon has done in order to make that like available to the user. That's why I decided to switch to Sony, because they're more video based in a lot of their cameras, but like I said, there are hybrid cameras and there are photo first cameras that you can get out there, and I just feel like there's way more options with Sony depending on the camera that you decide you want to get, whether you're a photographer first or a videographer first, or you just want to be a hybrid shooter. So next, internal customization and adding custom buttons and adding LUTs. So a lot of what Sony cameras are able to do, FX3, you know, FX30, A7S III, all those cameras, you can, and even the hybrid, more of the hybrid ones, you can even add a bunch of your internal settings, and you can change the way the button layout is and everything like that, and it's just way more customizable to the user to better help them suit what they have to do, and it just feels more personal to you. So when you have your camera, you just feel like this is yours because you customize it the way that you use it and the way that you feel is suiting your needs. Canon kind of lacks in that department, I feel. They don't really allow the user to customize as much. You know, they'll have some buttons, and if you're trying to customize, you know, any profiles or anything like that, you kind of can't. They kind of limit you a lot. Whereas Sony just kind of gives you that free reign. It's like, hey, you know, here's all your settings, here's the way you can customize it. You could even add a LUT if you want within your picture profile, and that's something Canon lacks, and I feel like a lot of video creators and a lot of video first people that shoot on Sony appreciate. Coming from Canon and coming from a T5i, which is an EF mount, and then going to an R6, which is an RF mount. As you know, Canon only makes RF lenses for their mounts, and they currently do not allow third-party distributors to make third-party lenses that you could put on your RF mounts, which is kind of a bummer. It kind of makes it a little bit more expensive just because those RF lenses are expensive. They're great. Canon's RF lenses are fantastic. They're big, they have great glass, but they're just expensive. And the great thing about Sony is that they have all those third-party options available to you. So you can use a Sony G Master, you can use a Zeiss, you can use a Tamron, you can use any third-party lens that you want on your E-mount Sony camera. I just feel like it gives the Sony user way more options, especially if they don't want to spend, you know, 2,000 plus on a lens or anything like that, when they can get a lens that's just as great for under that price, or even in that $1,000 or less price. If you're a Canon user and you decide you want to go with Canon, honestly, you won't be disappointed with those RF lenses. They're just pricey. You kind of have to take the price of the lenses and the bodies into effect, because price may be a big thing to you, but if price really isn't a huge deal to you, then it really doesn't matter. Then you're just kind of deciding, hey, I really like Sony or I really like Canon, and this is what I'm gonna go with. And I think this is a big one, especially if it comes to video first and video creators and anybody that just wants to strictly do video. I'd say Sony has Canon beat when it comes to dynamic range and low light. Dynamic range on Sony cameras is fantastic. The A7S III, the FX3, all these cameras have great dynamic range and great low light capability. Now, coming from the R6, the dynamic range was good, it just wasn't great. And I do like shooting at night, I do like shooting in low light scenarios and everything like that. There's no camera that I could look at on the R line and say, yes, that has just as great dynamic range as this Sony that I'm looking at. And I just feel like Sony has Canon beat when it comes to dynamic range, and especially low light performance. This one's kind of just more of a preference, actually. Both brands have great autofocus. Coming from the R6, the autofocus was absolutely amazing. Back in the day, people used to say that Sony's autofocus wasn't that great, but over the years, their autofocus has gotten really, really good. And coming from this right now, like this on my eye, like I'm just looking at the little square and it is locked. Like, I love the autofocus on these Sony cameras. You're gonna be satisfied with the autofocus, whichever one you go with, whether that's Sony or Canon. I'd say they both have really good autofocus at this point, and they're both kind of almost like, they're almost neck and neck with this autofocus game. I'd say Sony innovates a little bit more at this point, especially with the amount of cameras they come out with. Like, they recently just came out with the ZV-E1, which is more of a vlogger first, smaller FX3 camera, just with some limitations and no fan, but it's got other things that it doesn't, like AI and stuff like that. And it's just, they innovate a lot, especially towards giving the customer, you know, many options. I just feel like Sony pushes the innovation a little bit further now when it comes to their cameras and what they can do and how much they can put into a small body. So before I go off on the last topic, I'm just gonna say that whether you disagree or agree with any of this, it doesn't matter. It's just kind of just like to help you, whether it's to help you figure out which camera to go for or which brand to go for. But I will say that this is not a hit on Canon. I love Canon. Canon is great. Canon's always been great. I've always loved their cameras. But for me, these are the reasons why I chose to switch to Sony. It's not because I hate Canon, it's just, this is what works for me. And when it comes to a camera, you kind of just have to look at it and be like, this is kind of what works for me. This is what I feel that is gonna do best for me in the long run, what I want my long-term investment to be, and where I want to put my money. And you kind of see the path of each company, and you kind of decide, hey, you know what, I kind of want to stick with this one. It's kind of like Apple versus Android. You go for one because you kind of see the path and you kind of see like where they're probably headed, versus the other one where you're like, I'm not really sure, so I'm kind of gonna stick with this one. So that being said, I just feel like Sony listens a little bit more to their video creators, and if you're strictly a video creator like me, then I feel like Sony is great. And I feel like you can get really, really great cameras out of Sony. They give you a lot of options, they give you a lot of settings, they give you a lot of great features, video capabilities, so that you can literally do whatever you want with these cameras. And I feel like they are listening to the users a little bit more now with future firmware updates that have come out and that are probably going to come out, and the video capabilities along with like that new ZV-E1 that just came out. It's just they listen a little bit more to the video side. And if you're strictly wanting to do YouTube or filmmaking or anything like that, and you want to stick with just video, I feel like Sony's a great choice. Not to say that Canon's not, but you're just kind of you're kind of going into that photo first, video second type of realm, versus, you know, if you want to just strict just video and just, you know, have a lot more video and customizable capabilities, then maybe Sony's for you, but maybe it's not. Maybe you don't like either Canon and Sony. You kind of want to go for Nikon or Fujifilm, you know, or any of those. But this is more of just the Canon versus Sony and why I switched from Canon to Sony. I hope you enjoyed. There's probably a lot of ramble. I'm very happy with my purchase. If you're asking, the FX3 is great. You could ask me more questions about it down below. I'm still learning how to use it, obviously, coming from an R6 to a cinema line camera is way different, and there's a lot of things I'm still learning and figuring out and stuff like that. But I hope you enjoyed this video. My links are down below, you know, to follow me on Instagram and Twitter and all that greatness. If you want to subscribe, that'd be great. If you want to hit that like button, that'd be great. I would appreciate it. But yeah, until next time.